The first Assassin's Creed came out at a time when developers were still willing to take real risks, and you can feel that spirit in every part of the game. It wasn't playing things safe, it was full of clever original ideas, some of them rough, some of them confusing, but all of them trying something new. And that's really where the magic of the first Assassin's Creed comes from. Back in 2007, it genuinely felt different. Not perfect, not polished, just new. In a way, games didn't often feel new anymore. And if you played it back then, you know exactly what I mean. That first experience with Assassin's Creed was something special. For me, it was pure magic. In the lead up to release, Assassin's Creed was everywhere. The marketing made it look clean, stylish, cinematic. You're an assassin, you climb buildings, you kill targets, simple. But even in those trailers, something felt off. Characters would glitch, the screen would flicker, things didn't behave like a normal historical game. I don't think I questioned it, not until the game actually started. Because suddenly, I wasn't a medieval assassin at all. I was a modern day guy named Desmond, a regular bartender, kidnapped, strapped into a machine called the Animus. And I remember thinking, wait, what is happening? This wasn't how games started back then. I thought I was buying a historical action game, and suddenly I'm looking at DNA strands, synchronization bars, memory blocks, a full modern day sci-fi setup. Once I started exploring the cities, that's when Assassin's Creed really clicked for me. Jerusalem, Acre, Damascus, they didn't feel like levels, they felt like real places. Places I had to move through carefully. The streets were tight, sometimes awkward to navigate. Crowds were dense, constantly in the way, slowing me down. Guards were everywhere, and I was never really comfortable just sprinting around without thinking. Each city felt distinct, not just visually but in how it behaved. The architecture made sense, the layouts felt believable. And without spelling it out, the cities carried the tension of the Crusades within them. I wasn't being told this is a dangerous place, I understood it just by walking through it. No overwhelming markers, no constant distractions, the world felt focused, grounded, intentional. Between those cities was the kingdom, a wide open space that connected everything. It wasn't packed with activities, and that felt intentional. Most of the time it was just about the journey toward a city for the first time. Riding on horseback, running into soldiers and templars, climbing viewpoints, picking fights you didn't quite feel ready for yet, the kingdom became my training ground. It's where combat finally clicked, where mounted combat stopped feeling awkward, where I learned how to deal with groups without panicking. And then there was Immersive, completely different, controlled, disciplined, familiar, safe in a way the cities never were. I wasn't just jumping between missions, I was leaving home, stepping into something uncertain, and coming back changed, even if only a little. The crowds shaped everything I did, frustrating me just as often as they helped. Jar carriers, beggars, drunks, scholars, every one of them could either save your plan or ruin it. Beggars would grab you at the worst possible moment, drunks would stumble into your path, and scholars sometimes were the safest way through a heavily guarded area. Back then, disappearing into a crowd, becoming anonymous instead of unseen, made every success feel earned. I hadn't played anything else where a crowd worked like that. They weren't background noise, they weren't set dressing, they were part of the challenge, and learning how to read them mattered just as much as learning any other mechanic. Movement was probably the thing I enjoyed most when I first played Assassin's Creed. Almost everything was climbable, but never mindlessly so. Buildings were designed for movement in mind. Beams, ledges, cracks, banners, windows, everything was placed on purpose. You had to read the architecture and plan your route. Getting higher took effort, and mistakes actually mattered. I still remember how long it took me to stop accidentally back ejecting while climbing, watch an entire drop straight to the ground instead of grabbing the ledge I wanted. We all did that, but when it worked, it really worked. I remember climbing a huge cathedral for the first time, and genuinely feeling the height as I went up. Reaching the top felt earned, not like taking off a checklist. That's why viewpoints worked so well. They weren't just there to clear the map, they were rewards for committing to the climb. Synchronizing, seeing the city from above, it felt surreal back then, and honestly, it still does. And then the game asks you to leap. Jumping all the way down into Haystack was the perfect release after all that effort. The leap of faith wasn't just iconic, it made Altair feel fearless, precise, and completely in control. Parkour in Assassin's Creed was easy to perform, but it also had depth if you wanted more. You could move in a basic way and get by, or you could learn to chain movements, cancel animations, choose better routes, and suddenly traversal felt faster, freer, and more rewarding. I spent hours just running across rooftops, not chasing objectives, not following markers, just enjoying how free it felt to move without ever touching the ground. That freedom made the world feel more alive than most games I had played at the time. And that's why I still come back to Assassin's Creed. Sometimes I boot it up just to do a few parkour runs. The movement alone is that good, and I genuinely don't think it gets the credit it deserves. I won't pretend Assassin's Creed didn't have problems. One of the biggest criticisms after release was how repetitive the mission structure was. The same investigations over and over with very little variation in how they played out. Players noticed it, and they weren't wrong. But I think context matters. Even in the story, Altair complains about it. He wants to go straight for the kill. He's impatient, and that's the point. He has to learn discipline. That repetition wasn't just a limitation, it reinforced the fantasy the game was going for. Every major mission followed the same rhythm. You would begin at Immersive, receive your orders, travel through the kingdom, figure out how to enter the city, and then slowly build towards the assassination. The city didn't just hand you the target. The map was empty and you had to earn information, climbing viewpoints, eavesdropping on conversations, interrogating informants, sometimes eliminating secondary targets. I remember noticing the repetition, but it made the assassination feel earned. Altair wasn't just charging in, he was preparing, learning routines, understanding who the target really was. And by the time you went in for the kill, you knew where to stand, when to strike, and exactly how you were going to get out. The moment you assassinated a main target, the game made sure you felt it. Bells started ringing, the music kicked in hard, and in an instant, the entire city turned hostile. Guards poured in from every direction, and standing your ground almost never felt right, because the real challenge wasn't the assassination, it was getting out. Rooftop chases were tense, messy, and perfect because of it. Guards climbing ladders after you, arrows flying, people shouting below. You had to use the city properly to survive. You weren't meant to stand and fight your way out, you were meant to run, break the line of sight, and disappear. I still remember my heart racing until the chase music finally stopped and the guards gave up. That brief moment of relief never got old. Those escape sequences are some of the most memorable moments in the game for me because they were unpredictable. Sometimes everything went perfectly, sometimes everything went wrong. And that uncertainty is what made them exciting. Killing a target in AC1 felt like an event. It had a clear beginning and a clear end. And that's unfortunately something the series gradually moved away from over time. Combat in Assassin's Creed felt unusual the first time I experienced it. Not bad, just different. It wasn't about feeling powerful or overwhelming enemies, it was about timing, positioning, and waiting for the right moment. And a huge part of that was the Hidden Blade. It was something completely new, a small retractable weapon built for close control kills. It wasn't just a stealth tool either. You could use it in open combat, but it was risky, and that risk is exactly what made it so satisfying. Landing a counter with a hidden blade demanded patience and precision, and when you got it right, it felt clean. That sharp sound when it came out is still burned into my memory. On the surface, the combat system looked simple, block, counter, strike. But once you understood its rhythm, it opened up in a really interesting way. Button mashing didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. You had to read your enemies, wait, and react at exactly the right moment. As you learn more techniques, combat begins to open up. You can chain counters, disarm enemies, and use throwing knives to thin out a group. There's even this cool mechanic where a hidden blade counter leaves a guard reeling with fear, and that fear can ripple through the group, creating openings to quietly finish the rest. I absolutely love landing finishes during combat, especially the counter kills. Those animations felt smooth and satisfying. Altair moved like someone trained for this, not someone improvising. And at any moment you could disengage completely and turn combat into a chase. At first, the Animus just felt strange. You're looking at DNA strands, memory blocks, synchronization meters, and none of it is explained in a comforting way. But the more I play, the more I started to realize that the Animus isn't just a framing device for the story. It's the reason the game works the way it does. Your health isn't really health, it's synchronization. When you mess up, you're not dying, you are desynchronizing, because you are doing things Altair wouldn't have done. The menu, the HUD, the way progression is shown as blocks of DNA, all of it feels like part of this simulation you're inside. And I love the smaller touches too, like being able to interact with cutscenes during the Animus glitches or subtly changing the camera. It constantly reminded you that you weren't just playing a game, you were inside a machine replaying memories. And back in 2007, that connection between story and mechanics felt genuinely new, something that still stands out today, because every part of the interface existed for a reason. The modern day sections mattered too. They were short, but they added tension. You were learning about this larger conflict between assassins and Templars at the same time Desmond was. And the game kept raising more questions than it answered. And that mystery was exciting. The 9 targets weren't random people just there to give you something to kill. They were all part of the same conspiracy, and you uncovered it slowly, piece by piece. What made it even more powerful was how much of it was rooted in real history. When Assassin's Creed released, the reaction to it was messy. The game had been heavily hyped, and almost immediately, its limits were thrown back at it. The repetitive structure, the lack of things to do, the science fiction framing, the combat, the technical roughness, it wasn't perfect. But looking back, a lot of that backlash feels less like the game failing and more like players and critics slowly realizing what it actually was. Revisiting the first Assassin's Creed today feels like returning to a kind of game we don't really see anymore. A game that tried something new and fully committed to it. And for those of us who were there, who played it back then, the first Assassin's Creed was magical. It was different, it was strange, it was risky, and that's what made it special. That was the magic of the first Assassin's Creed.